In all of cannabis, there are really only a handful of strains that everybody agrees are legendary. The ones that built entire scenes, shaped whole regions, and ended up in the family tree of half the weed on the market today. And right at the very top of that list sit two names: OG Kush, the king of the West Coast, and Sour Diesel, the king of the East Coast. Now imagine taking those two giants, the best of California and the best of New York, and combining them into one single strain. That's exactly what Headband is. It's the child of cannabis royalty, a genetic handshake between the two coasts. But here's the twist. For a strain this famous, almost nobody can agree on who actually made it, or even what's really in it. This is the story of Headband. To understand why Headband is such a big deal, you first have to understand its parents, because these are not just two random strains. These are two of the most important plants in the entire history of weed. So let's start out west with OG Kush. OG Kush is basically the backbone of West Coast cannabis. The story goes that in the mid-1990s, a grower from Florida named Matt Berger came up on some special genetics and brought a few cuttings out to Los Angeles, where a grower known as Josh D took that plant, dialed it in, and turned it into a legend. And out of all the cuttings that made that trip, only one even survived. From that single plant, OG Kush exploded across Southern California, earned the nickname the California Queen, and went on to become the parent of a ridiculous number of strains. Part of what makes OG Kush so special is its lineage, which traces back through Hindu Kush genetics, giving it that dense, resinous, earthy foundation. If you have ever smoked anything with OG in the name, you can probably trace it back to this one plant. That's how foundational it is. Now let's head to the complete opposite side of the country, to New York, for the other parent, Sour Diesel. If OG Kush was the king of the West, Sour Diesel was the undisputed king of the East. It came up out of the early 90s New York underground, and the story of how it got there is one of the best in all of cannabis. It traces back to a legendary cut called ChemDog 91, a specific phenotype that a grower known as AJ is credited with developing, originally tied back to seeds traded at a 1991 Grateful Dead concert in Indiana. The ChemDog 91 genetics ended up becoming the common ancestor of some of the most important strains in history, and Sour Diesel was one of them. It became the status symbol of the entire East Coast. This was the loud, gassy, pungent strain that reeked of fuel and citrus, and hit you with a soaring, electric head high. It was celebrated in hip-hop. It defined what good weed smelled like in New York City, and it became the East Coast's answer to Kush. Two coasts, two kings, two completely different styles of weed. And Headband is what you get when you put them together. You take the heavy, earthy, gassy foundation of OG Kush, and you cross it with the bright, sharp fuel and lemon punch of Sour Diesel, and you get this strain that genuinely feels like the best of both worlds. So, on paper, it's simple. Headband is OG Kush crossed with Sour Diesel. But this is where the clean story ends, and the mystery begins. Because here's the honest truth. For a strain this popular, the origins of Headband are about as murky as it gets. If somebody tells you they know exactly who made the first Headband and exactly what's in it, they're probably bluffing. For one thing, even the genetics are debated. The most accepted version is that it's just an OG Kush and Sour Diesel cross, but some people insist there is a third strain in there called Master Kush. On the other hand, there are people saying that the original Headband wasn't even a new cross at all, that it was basically just a well-known OG Kush clone that somebody renamed to give it a fresh identity, which was an extremely common move back in those days. But the genetics are only half of the mystery. The bigger question is who actually created Headband, which is its own rabbit hole. A big part of the Headband story comes out of Northern California, specifically the area covered by the 707 area code, which covers Humboldt County and the heart of the Emerald Triangle, the most famous weed-growing region in America. That is why one of the most well-known versions of this strain is called 707 Headband. That cut is tied to a respected late breeder known as Mandelbrot, who was one of the key figures spreading these gassy diesel genetics all through the Emerald Triangle in the early 2000s. But he is not the only name in the mix. Another respected California breeder, Loompa Farms, had his own famous Headband cut that he had gotten from a secret source, and his version was highly regarded in connoisseur circles. And then there is the seed company Reserva Privada, run by the team at DNA Genetics, who made their own seed version of Headband by crossing the two parents. And here is a detail that tells you just how confusing this all got. Because there were already so many different Headband clones floating around, Reserva Privada actually decided to rename their version entirely and just call it Sour Kush, specifically to avoid all the confusion. So when you ask who invented Headband, the real answer is that there is not one single person. Headband is more like a family of very similar cuts that all came up around the same time in the Northern California scene and ended up under the same name. The exact who and when got lost in the fog of the pre-legal era, back when nobody was keeping records and everybody was trading clones in parking lots. And honestly, that mystery is part of its legend. But there's one thing about this strain that is not up for debate, and it's the reason it has the name it does. Because Headband is one of those rare strains that's named after exactly what it does to you. When you smoke it, a lot of people report this very specific sensation. A gentle band of pressure that wraps around your temples, your forehead, and the crown of your head. It literally feels like you are wearing a tight hat or a headband. That's where the name comes from. And among connoisseurs, that pressure is actually seen as a sign of the real deal. If you feel that signature band around your head, you know you have authentic Headband genetics. Some people think it comes from the strain's high THC affecting the blood vessels in your face, though that is more of a working theory than a proven fact. Beyond that Headband feeling, the strain delivers everything you'd expect from those parents. The smell is loud, a mix of sharp lemon and diesel fuel up front, with earthy, piney, almost creamy notes underneath. But a lot of that comes down to the terpene profile, which is typically dominated by myrcene, limonene, and caryophyllene. Myrcene brings that earthy, herbal base. Limonene is responsible for the citrus and lemon bite, and caryophyllene adds the spicy, fuel-forward edge. It's the kind of weed that stinks up a room even when it's sealed in a bag. The buds are dense, frosty, and absolutely covered in sticky resin, looking absolutely beautiful. The THC usually lands somewhere in the low 20s to high 20s, so it's definitely very potent. And the high is this slow creeper that starts in your head, builds into a long, euphoric, almost dreamy headspace, and eventually settles into a relaxed body buzz without totally knocking you out. It became known as a perfect strain for stress and tension, the kind of thing you smoke to melt the day off. That combination is exactly why it blew up. Headband started selling like crazy in the medical dispensary scene in the 2000s, a period when California's Proposition 215 had opened the door to legal medical cannabis. It was a staple on legal menus through the 2010s. It even made the top 10 in the Cannabis Cup, taking third place at the 2009 event, but it was not entered under the name Headband. The entry used the Sour Kush name. It started to become a true connoisseur favorite, the kind of strain serious smokers name when you ask them what they actually like. And it spun off its own little family of strains too, with crosses like sour headband, blueberry headband, and a bunch more. It even crossed over into pop culture, sharing its name with a platinum-selling song by B.O.B. and 2 Chainz in 2013. But when you take a step back and look, the coolest thing about Headband isn't the pressure, or the gas, or even the potency. It's what it represents. For decades, the two coasts of American weed kind of had their own separate worlds. The West had its Kush, the East had its Diesel, and the two rarely met. Headband is the strain that married them. It took the King of California and the Queen of New York and turned them into a single plant that smokers on both coasts could agree on. It's a genetic bridge across the entire country, built from the two biggest names the culture has ever produced.